No one hunts snipers at night, Commander Hayes muttered as snow began falling thick across the blackened valley. The radio stayed silent. One of their snipers had just gone down. No gunshot, no warning, just blood spreading across the Christmas snow. Lieutenant Rachel Donovan tightened her grip on the cold rifle in her hands, the only woman on the team, the one they called Supply Room Ghost. When distant church bells rang out at midnight, she whispered into her earpiece, "They're wrong. Tonight, we hunt them back." Before dawn, 10 shadows would never see Christmas morning. The outpost sat on a ridge that military planners had designated Checkpoint Victor 7, though none of the men stationed there bothered with official names anymore. They called it the Frozen Edge because that's what it felt like, the last warm place before the world dropped into darkness and ice. Rachel stood in the operations tent, watching frost form on the inside of the canvas walls. December 24th. Somewhere back home, families were wrapping presents and singing carols. Here, the only song was wind howling through mountain passes that had seen 3,000 years of war. "Donovan, you're on equipment check," Sergeant Blake called out, not bothering to look up from the tactical map. "Make sure thermal scopes are charged." She nodded once. No point arguing. 6 months embedded with SEAL Team 9, and they still treated her like she was waiting for her real assignment to begin. The truth was more complicated. Rachel had qualified expert marksman at sniper school, scored in the top 5% on cold weather operations, and completed 3 combat deployments, but she was quiet, didn't drink with the men, didn't tell war stories. So they filed her under competent support and moved on. She didn't mind. Silence was tactical. Outside, snow fell in sheets that blurred the ridgeline. Christmas lights would have been visible from the village below, if the village still existed. Now it was just rubble and memories, evacuated 3 weeks ago when intelligence reported enemy advancement. "Team leaders, check in," Hayes said into the main radio. "Alpha team, position holding. Bravo team, north quadrant secure. Charlie team, static." Hayes frowned. "Charlie team, confirm position." More static than a voice breaking through interference. "Charlie lead is down. I say again, Charlie lead is..." The transmission cut out. Rachel's eyes went to the thermal display. Charlie team's position showed 3 heat signatures, then 2, then 1 fading fast. "Get me eyes on Charlie," Hayes barked. She was already moving, grabbing her rifle and night vision. But she knew what they'd find. The way that signature had disappeared, no explosion, no firefight, meant professional work. "Donovan, where are you going?" "Charlie position. 2 minutes. Negative. Stand by for..." She was already through the tent flap, swallowed by snow and darkness. The mountain at night felt like being underwater, sounds muffled, vision reduced to shapes and shadows. Rachel moved through terrain she'd memorized during daylight hours, every rock and tree cataloged in her mind. Charlie team had set up on an outcrop 50 meters below the ridge. Good sightlines, decent cover, the kind of position that looked perfect until someone better came along. She found the first body face down in snow, already dusting over with fresh powder. Clean headshot, no exit wound visible from this angle, which meant subsonic rounds. Suppressed weapon, professional equipment. The second body lay 3 meters away, killed mid-movement. He'd been running toward cover when the round caught him. Rachel dropped to one knee and scanned the valley with her scope. Standard protocol said wait for backup. Standard protocol got people killed. "This is Donovan. 2 KIA at Charlie position. No visual on shooter. Fall back to the outpost," Hayes ordered. "That's direct." "Contact," another voice cut in. "Delta team taking fire." Rachel's jaw tightened. Delta was positioned on the opposite end of the ridge. If enemy snipers had them bracketed from both sides, everyone in this outpost was already dead. They just didn't know it yet. Rachel ran in a crouch back toward the main ridge, her breath forming clouds that dissipated instantly in the wind. The radio chatter told the story. Delta team had lost 1 man, possibly 2. No one could identify firing positions. Inside the operations tent, controlled chaos. Men shouting coordinates, checking ammunition, arguing about response protocols. "We need air support." "In this weather? You're insane." "Then we extract. Pull everyone back to..." "Commander." Rachel's voice cut through the noise. Not loud, but precise, like a blade. Hayes looked up, his face tight with stress. "Donovan, I ordered you to." "They're not random shots," she said. "Charlie team died from the northeast. Delta's taking fire from the southwest. This is a coordinated hunter team." "We know that," Blake snapped. "Question is what we do about it." Rachel moved to the tactical map, her finger tracing vectors. "They're using a two-team rotation. One shoots, the other relocates. By the time we return fire, they're gone. Classic counter-sniper doctrine." "So what's your genius plan?" Blake's voice dripped skepticism. She met his eyes. "We hunt them." The tent went quiet except for wind buffeting canvas. "Hunt them," Hayes repeated slowly. "You want to send men out into a snowstorm? At night? Against snipers who've already killed 3 of ours?" "No, sir. I want to go alone." Someone laughed. "Blake, probably." "Donovan, this isn't the time for—" "No one hunts snipers at night," Rachel said, her voice flat. "That's what they think. That's why they're confident enough to stay close. They expect us to hide until daylight." Hayes studied her. "You've done this before." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Helmand Province, 2019. Taliban had us pinned for 2 days. Someone had to break the perimeter." "That was you?" She didn't respond. The mission report existed for anyone who cared to look. Most people didn't. Hayes rubbed his face, exhaustion and calculation warring behind his eyes. "If I send you out there and you get killed, I'm explaining to your family why I let their daughter hunt trained killers in a blizzard. If you don't send me, you're explaining to 8 families why you let everyone die in this tent." The math was simple and brutal. Hayes knew it. "You get 4 hours, he said finally. "If you're not back by 0400, we assume you're KIA and extract at first light." Rachel nodded once and turned toward her gear. "Donovan," Hayes called after her, "why you? Why volunteer for this?" She paused at the tent entrance, snow swirling around her silhouette. "Because I'm the one who can do it." Then she was gone into the darkness. Rachel's kit for a solo hunt was minimal. Rifle, 3 magazines, thermal scope, knife, emergency beacon. Everything else was weight that would slow her down. She moved away from the outpost lights, letting her eyes adjust to the mountain darkness. Snow was both ally and enemy. It muffled sound but also recorded movement. Every step had to be deliberate. The thermal scope revealed what naked eyes couldn't: heat signatures, wind patterns, the subtle warmth of recently disturbed snow. She scanned the northeast sector where Charlie team had died. There, a faint thermal trace 30 degrees off the expected angle. The shooter had fired from a depression that protected them from counter-battery radar. Smart, military training, not insurgent opportunism. Rachel circled wide, moving parallel to the suspected position. Patience was the first rule of sniper work. Haste left bodies. Her mind drifted to the conversation that had ended her last relationship. Derek had wanted her to leave the military, take a teaching job, start a family, normal life, safe life. "You don't have to prove anything," he'd said. But that was the problem. She did. Every day, every mission. Because the alternative was watching from the sidelines while people died who could have been saved. A branch snapped under the snow, not from her movement. Rachel froze, becoming part of the landscape. Breathing shallow, heart rate controlled. Techniques drilled into muscle memory until they became instinct. 200 meters ahead, a shape moved against the tree line. Human height, carrying weight. She raised her scope. The figure was crouched beside a fallen log, assembling something. Not a rifle, too bulky. She zoomed closer and recognized the thermal signature of a portable heater. They were setting up for a long watch. Amateur mistake. Heat signatures were visible for kilometers. Rachel calculated angles, wind speed, target movement patterns. The shooter would be looking toward the outpost, expecting return fire from that direction. They wouldn't expect contact from their 6 o'clock. She moved 3 steps closer. Snow crunched softly. She froze again. The figure's head turned slightly, listening. Rachel didn't breathe, didn't blink, became stone. 30 seconds passed. The figure returned to their task. She covered the final 100 meters in 15 minutes, each step placed with surgical precision. Close enough now to hear voices, 2 men speaking a language she didn't recognize. But the tone was clear. Boredom, confidence. They thought they were safe. Rachel settled into position behind a snow-covered boulder, her rifle resting on a natural bipod of frozen earth. She acquired the first target through her scope. Center mass. Exhale. Squeeze. The suppressed shot was a soft cough swallowed by wind. The man dropped without sound. His partner started to turn, reaching for his radio. Rachel had already adjusted. Second shot. Cleaner than the first. 2 down. She waited 5 full minutes, watching for response. None came. Either these were an isolated team, or their main force was disciplined enough not to break radio silence. Rachel moved to the bodies and checked their equipment. High-end Russian gear, night vision, subsonic ammunition. This wasn't local militia. These were professionals, probably contractors hired by whoever wanted this mountain. She pulled dog tags from the first man. No identification, just serial numbers. Ghost soldiers. Her radio crackled. Donovan, status? 2 targets eliminated. Northeast sector. Moving to sector 2. Copy. Delta reports no contact for 20 minutes. Because their partner team was dead, Rachel thought. The rotation was broken, but if this was a trained unit, they'd notice the silence. They'd adapt. She had to move faster. The valley below was a maze of shadows and snowdrifts that could hide a battalion or nothing at all. Rachel descended carefully, using terrain features to mask her thermal signature. Standard counter-sniper doctrine said, work in pairs. One watches, one moves. But she had no partner, which meant every decision was hers alone, liberating and terrifying in equal measure. The next suspected position was southwest, where Delta team had taken casualties. She'd covered half the distance when her scope caught movement. 3 heat signatures clustered near an abandoned vehicle. 3 was wrong. Sniper teams operated in pairs. 3 meant either leadership or a trap. Rachel circled wide again, approaching from an unexpected angle. The wind had picked up, driving snow horizontally across exposed ridges. Good for concealment, bad for precision shooting. Through her scope, she watched the 3 figures. They were arguing, gestures sharp with frustration. One kept pointing back toward where Rachel had killed the first team. They knew something was wrong. She ranged the distance, 340 meters. Long shot in these conditions, but manageable. Then the center figure pulled out a radio and spoke urgently. Calling for backup, probably. Or reporting the situation to command. Rachel couldn't let that transmission complete. She steadied her breathing, calculated wind speed from the snow patterns, adjusted for temperature and humidity. The rifle was an extension of her body, every component calibrated to her specifications. First shot hit the radio man in the throat. He collapsed, the radio tumbling into snow. The other 2 scattered immediately, professional training evident in their movement, but they scattered in opposite directions. Textbook response that actually made them easier to target separately. Rachel tracked left. The shooter was running toward a rock formation, zigging to avoid fire. She led the target, accounting for movement, and fired. The figure stumbled but didn't fall. Body armor. She adjusted and fired again, this time aiming for the gap between armor plates. Target down. The 3rd shooter had vanished into a crevasse. Rachel waited, scope steady, breathing controlled. Patience. 1 minute, 2, 3. There a flicker of movement near the crevasse edge. The shooter was trying to flank around, using the terrain as cover. Rachel had already anticipated this. She'd moved 30 meters to the right while waiting, breaking her own thermal signature pattern. When the shooter emerged, he was looking at where she'd been, not where she was. 1 shot, center mass. 4 down. Rachel's radio buzzed. Donovan, we have thermal signatures converging on your position. Multiple contacts, moving fast. She was already moving, abandoning stealth for speed. The snow grabbed at her boots, each step requiring extra effort. Her breath came harder now, both from exertion and adrenaline. Behind her, voices shouted in the darkness. They'd found the bodies. She had minutes, maybe less. Rachel ran through terrain that wanted to kill her, loose rocks hidden under snow, sudden drops that appeared without warning, ice that turned solid ground into a skating rink. Behind her, pursuit crashed through undergrowth with the confidence of superior numbers. She counted at least 5 distinct voices, probably more. Her thermal scope confirmed 7 heat signatures spread in a search pattern. Professional trackers who knew how to sweep terrain. The hunted had become the hunter. Rachel dropped into a ravine and pressed herself against the frozen wall, controlling her breathing to minimize the thermal signature. The pursuers passed above, their lights cutting through snow like prison searchlights. "She came this way," someone said in accented English. "Blood trail stops here." Blood trail? Rachel checked herself and found it a graze across her left bicep she hadn't felt happen. Not serious, but leaking enough to create a visible trail in the snow. She wrapped the wound quickly with cloth torn from her sleeve, then started moving laterally along the ravine. The pursuers expected her to run away from them. Instead, she'd circle behind. The ravine opened into a clearing where wind had piled snow into drifts tall as houses. Rachel climbed one carefully, using it as both cover and vantage point. From this position, she could see the search pattern. They were good, maintaining spacing, covering angles, using hand signals to coordinate. But they were looking down, following her trail. They weren't looking up. Rachel settled into a firing position, using the snowdrift as both camouflage and support. She picked her first target, the tracker with the thermal scanner. Take him out, and they'd lose their technological advantage. She fired. The figure dropped. Immediately, the others scattered and went prone. Discipline. These weren't random contractors, but going prone in deep snow created problems. Limited mobility, reduced fields of fire. They'd traded immediate safety for tactical disadvantage. Rachel waited for someone to move. Patience was her weapon now. 30 seconds. A head lifted slightly, trying to spot her position. She fired. The head disappeared, but she couldn't confirm the kill. The snow was too deep. Now, they knew roughly where she was. Return fire kicked up snow around her position, forcing her to slide down the back of the drift. She ran while they were focused on where she'd been, putting a rock formation between herself and their position. Her lungs burned. The altitude and cold were taking their toll. Distant church bells rang across the valley. Midnight. Christmas Day had arrived in the worst place imaginable. Rachel checked her ammunition. 1 magazine left, plus 3 rounds in her current mag. She'd have to make them count. The bells from the valley village continued their ghostly toll, marking a holiday that felt like mockery in this frozen hell. Rachel used the sound as cover for movement, timing her steps to match the bell strikes. Her pursuers had regrouped into 2 teams of 3. Better tactics, harder to isolate targets, but it also meant they divided their attention. She circled back toward the first team, moving like a shadow through terrain she'd memorized during her earlier hunt. Every rock, every tree, every killing position filed away for moments exactly like this. The lead tracker was using a thermal scope, scanning systematically. Rachel watched from concealment as he swept past her position twice, never quite seeing her. She draped her thermal blanket over a rock formation, creating a false signature 30 meters away. The tracker focused on the decoy, signaled his team. They moved toward it cautiously. Rachel was already behind them. She dropped the first one with a knife. Silent, brutal, effective. The body settled into snow without sound. The second turned at some instinct of danger. Rachel shot him point blank, the suppressed round muffled by the body itself. The third tracker spun, bringing his rifle up. Fast, but Rachel was faster, powered by adrenaline and muscle memory drilled through 10,000 training repetitions. Her shot took him in the chest. He fell backward, triggering his rifle reflexively. The shots went wild, but the noise echoed across the valley. Now everyone knew where she was. Rachel ran. No time for stealth anymore. Behind her, the second team was closing in, moving with the confidence of people who had their target trapped. Ahead, the terrain dropped sharply into a steep ravine with a frozen stream at the bottom. Certain death if she slipped, better odds than staying to fight 3-on-1 with limited ammunition. She slid down the slope, half running, half falling, using rocks and bushes to control her descent. Ice cracked beneath her boots. Snow cascaded around her. At the bottom, she splashed through the frozen stream, actually splashed, because the ice was thin here, breaking under her weight. Water soaked through her boots instantly. She had maybe an hour before frostbite became a serious concern. Above, her pursuers reached the ravine edge. They weren't following down, too risky in the dark. But they also weren't leaving. They were setting up firing positions, preparing to wait for dawn when they could see her clearly. Rachel moved downstream, using the ravine walls as cover. Her teeth chattered. Wet feet in this cold was a death sentence. just slower than a bullet. She needed shelter, heat, time to think. Ahead, the ravine widened into a natural bowl where something metallic caught moonlight. She approached carefully and found the wreckage of an old military vehicle, probably from a conflict decades ago. The cab was partially intact, protected from snow by an overhang. It wasn't warm, but it was drier than outside. Rachel climbed inside and checked her weapons. Rifle still functional. 2 shots left in her current magazine, 1 full magazine remaining. Knife, 1 thermal grenade. Against 3 trained shooters with high ground and patience, it wasn't enough. Unless she changed the game entirely. Rachel studied the tactical situation with the cold logic that had kept her alive through 3 combat deployments. She was wet, tired, low on ammunition, and trapped in a ravine with enemy fighters controlling the high ground. Any reasonable assessment said she was dead, but reasonable assessments didn't account for desperation, creativity, and the sheer stubborn refusal to die that had carried her through every impossible situation. She checked her radio. Outpost, this is Donovan. Static, then Hayes' voice, tense with worry. Donovan, where the hell are you? We lost your signal 20 minutes ago. Pinned in ravine. Coordinates. She read off her position. Multiple hostiles still operational. I need a distraction in 3 minutes. What kind of distraction? Light up the valley. Flares, spotlights, anything that draws attention. That'll expose our position. They already know where you are, Commander. Right now they're focused on killing me. Use that. A pause, then, you've got your 3 minutes. Don't waste them. Rachel climbed out of the vehicle wreck and started preparing. The thermal grenade went on top of the cab, positioned to detonate upward. She used wire from the vehicle to create a crude tripwire connected to the grenade pin. Then she took her thermal blanket and wrapped it around a bundle of debris, creating a human-shaped signature. She placed this decoy 15 meters from the vehicle, in clear view from above. Finally, she found a position downstream with a clear sightline back to the ravine mouth where she absolutely knew the enemy commander would be watching. 1 minute. Rachel steadied her breathing. Checked her rifle one last time. 2 rounds. They had to count. 30 seconds. She thought about Derek, probably waking up Christmas morning in his warm apartment, wondering why she'd chosen this life over his safe, reasonable alternative. Because someone had to, she thought. Because the world needed people willing to stand in cold darkness so others could celebrate in warm light. 10 seconds. The valley erupted with light. The outpost had fired illumination rounds, white phosphorus flares that turned night into artificial day. Shadows danced crazily as the flares descended on small parachutes. Above Rachel's position, the enemy fighters reacted exactly as predicted. They focused on the light, looking toward the outpost, which meant they weren't watching the ravine. Rachel saw him then, the commander, distinctive by his position and the way the others deferred to his signals. He was giving orders, pointing toward the outpost. She ranged the distance. 420 meters. Extreme range in these conditions, nearly impossible. But not quite impossible. Rachel accounted for everything. Wind speed, temperature, humidity, the slight upward angle, the target's movement pattern. She breathed out slowly and fired. The commander spun and dropped. His second-in-command turned, trying to locate the shooter. Rachel was already adjusting, accounting for his movement toward cover. Her final rifle round caught him before he reached safety. 2 shots, 2 kills. The remaining fighter abandoned his position and ran. Smart. Survival instincts overriding mission parameters. Rachel didn't pursue. She was out of rifle ammunition, freezing, and exhausted. But alive. Rachel hauled herself up the ravine wall using pure stubborn will. Her hands were numb, fingers barely responding to commands. The wet boots had gone from painful to numb, never a good sign. At the top, she found the 2 bodies. The commander's thermal scope was still functional. She took it, along with his ammunition. Wrong caliber for her rifle, but the grenade bandolier fit. The eastern sky was just starting to show the faintest hint of light. Dawn was maybe 90 minutes away. Her radio crackled. Donovan? Status? 8 confirmed kills, 2 more probable. Heading back. Jesus Christ. Hayes' voice carried disbelief and respect in equal measure. Medical team standing by. Negative on medical. Not finished yet. Donovan, you've done enough. Get back here before. She turned the radio volume down. Later, she'd face the consequences of ignoring orders. Right now, there were still enemy fighters on this mountain. The runner from the ravine had headed south. Rachel found his tracks in the snow running, not tactical movement. Fear made people sloppy. She followed at a measured pace, conserving energy. The tracks led to a cave system she'd noted during earlier reconnaissance. Natural shelter, good defensive position. Also a trap if the runner was smarter than she'd assumed. Rachel approached from above, using a crack in the rock face to get a view inside the cave mouth. One heat signature, sitting against the back wall, either injured or exhausted, possibly both. She dropped a rock down the crack. It clattered loudly against stone. The figure inside moved slightly but didn't emerge. Not tactical response, just someone too tired to care anymore. Rachel climbed down and entered the cave, knife ready, senses alert for ambush. But the man sitting against the wall wasn't a threat. He was maybe 19, his hands shaking, rifle lying useless 3 feet away. Their eyes met. He said something in Russian, a plea, probably, or surrender. Rachel kept her knife ready. "Radio," she said. "Give me your radio." He fumbled at his vest and pulled out a military radio, handed it over with shaking hands. She stepped back, maintaining distance. "Who sent you?" He didn't answer. Maybe didn't understand, or maybe loyalty trumped survival instinct. Rachel checked his radio frequencies, memorizing the settings. Intelligence would want this information. Then she zip-tied his hands and feet, using supplies from her kit. "Someone will find you," she said, not knowing if he understood. Probably. She left him there and continued south, following the radio chatter she could now monitor. There were still at least 2 teams operational, maybe more. The sky was definitely lighter now. She had maybe an hour before full dawn, when thermal scopes became less effective and the advantage shifted back to whoever had numbers. Time was her enemy now. The radio chatter was frantic, multiple voices overlapping in Russian and broken English. They knew their teams were being eliminated. They knew someone was hunting them systematically, but they couldn't locate her, couldn't predict her next move. Fear made people dangerous and sloppy in equal measure. Rachel tracked the nearest team to a position overlooking the outpost they'd set up to provide covering fire for an assault that would never come now. 2 shooters, well positioned with interlocking fields of fire, professional setup. They weren't panicking yet. She circled wide, using the growing light to her advantage. Dawn created long shadows that confused depth perception. She moved through these shadows like a ghost. The shooters were focused on the outpost, waiting for orders. Their radio was active, someone speaking in urgent Russian about abort procedures and extraction. Rachel got within 50 meters before they noticed something wrong. One turned, raising his rifle toward her position. She threw the thermal grenade. It arced through the air, landed between them, and detonated in a flash of heat and light that overwhelmed their thermal scopes. While they were blind, Rachel closed the distance. 2 quick shots from a pistol she'd taken from an earlier kill. 10 confirmed. She sagged against a boulder, breathing hard. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind exhaustion and pain from a dozen minor injuries she'd been ignoring. Her radio, the enemy radio, crackled with a woman's voice speaking calm English. "All teams, pull back to extraction point Echo. Mission abort. Repeat, mission abort." Rachel listened as acknowledgements came back. 3 teams still operational, all retreating. She could let them go. She'd completed the mission, broken their assault, saved the outpost. No one would question her success. But something in that calm voice bothered her. Too professional, too controlled. This wasn't just hired muscle taking a contract. This was military command, which meant they'd be back. Rachel pushed herself upright and started moving toward extraction point Echo. She had maybe 20 minutes before they reached it, maybe less. The terrain sloped downward toward a flat area where a helicopter could land. She found an overwatch position and settled in to wait. Dawn broke fully as the first enemy team appeared. They moved cautiously, covering angles, maintaining discipline even in retreat. Good soldiers. Wrong mission. Rachel counted heads through her scope. 6 fighters total, carrying their wounded, equipment intact. They were looking up, watching for air support or ambush from the outpost. They weren't watching the ridge above them. She considered letting them go. It would be the humane choice. The military command would call it the professional choice. But that calm voice on the radio belonged to someone who'd sent men to kill her team on Christmas Eve. Someone who'd created those 3 new widows back home. Professional became personal somewhere along the way. Rachel acquired her first target, the team leader, identifiable by position and body language. She breathed out and fired the rifle she'd taken from the commander. The leader dropped. Chaos erupted. The team scattered, seeking cover that didn't exist in the open ground. Rachel worked methodically, selecting targets by threat level, compensating for their movement and panic. The rifle had good optics, but unfamiliar weight. She adjusted on the fly, each shot a calculation of probability and necessity. 4 more went down before they identified her position and returned fire. Rounds sparked off rocks near her head. She rolled left and came up firing from a new angle. 1 shot. The radio operator went down. Only 1 fighter remained standing now, young, terrified, screaming into his radio for help that wouldn't arrive. Rachel centered her crosshairs on his chest. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The fighter dropped his weapon and raised his hands. Surrender. Rachel held her aim for 5 seconds that felt like hours. Then she lowered the rifle. "Run," she said, knowing he couldn't hear but hoping he'd understand. "Run and don't come back." He ran. She let him. Rachel made it back to the outpost as full morning light turned the snow-covered mountains into something almost beautiful. The violence of the night seemed impossible in this clean, white landscape. The gate guard saw her coming and immediately called for Hayes. By the time she reached the command tent, half the team was waiting. She looked like hell, bloody, wet, covered in dirt and snow. Her hands shook from cold and exhaustion. But she was walking, carrying her rifle, still operational. Hayes stepped forward, his face unreadable. "Report." 10 confirmed kills, Rachel said, her voice rough from hours in the cold. 3 probable. Enemy force neutralized. 1 allowed to retreat, to carry message to command. "Allowed to retreat," Blake repeated, disbelief clear. "You're saying you had him and let him go?" "I'm saying I made a tactical decision that someone should survive to report what happens when you hunt us." Hayes studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "Medical tent, that's an order." She went, not because of the order, but because her body was shutting down now that the mission was complete. Medics descended on her, checking vitals, treating wounds, forcing hot liquids into her. She let them work, drifting in a haze of exhaustion. Later, hours later, maybe days, time got fuzzy. She woke in a clean bed wearing dry clothes. Sunlight streamed through a window. Christmas Day, she remembered. The day had finally arrived. Hayes sat in a chair beside her bed. "Welcome back." "How long?" 12 hours. "You crashed pretty hard after the medics cleared you. Mild hypothermia, dehydration, exhaustion, nothing permanent." He paused. "Intelligence confirmed your kills. Also confirmed that enemy force has pulled back 50 clicks. We're calling it a strategic withdrawal. They'll be back. Probably, but not soon, and not here. You hurt them badly enough that this position isn't worth the cost anymore." Hayes leaned forward. "I was wrong, Donovan. About you. About what was possible. I'm sorry." She met his eyes. "I don't need an apology, sir. I need you to remember when someone tells you they can do the job." "Fair enough." He stood to leave, then stopped at the door. "The men are calling you, Ghost. Thought you should know." Rachel smiled slightly. "Better than supply room." After he left, she lay back and stared at the ceiling. Her body hurt everywhere. Her hands still shook occasionally. She'd killed at least 13 people in one night, more than in her previous 3 deployments combined. She should feel something about that. Guilt, maybe, or horror. But all she felt was tired, and satisfied that when the moment came, she'd been exactly who she needed to be. No one had thrown a celebration. No one had pinned medals on her chest or made speeches about heroism. The team had simply looked at her differently when she passed respect where there'd been dismissal, acknowledgement where there'd been invisibility. She'd proven something to them. More importantly, she'd proven it to herself. On the small table beside her bed, someone had left a plate with Christmas cookies and a note in Hayes' handwriting. "Merry Christmas, Ghost. You earned these." Rachel took a cookie and savored it slowly. It tasted like victory. Outside, church bells rang across the valley, the real bells this time, not the ghostly echoes of midnight. She listened to them and thought about Derek's safe, reasonable life. Maybe someday she'd want that. A warm house, stable routine, days that didn't involve hunting or being hunted. But not today. Not this life. Not while mountains needed defending and people needed someone willing to stand in the cold darkness. She closed her eyes and let the bells carry her back to sleep, knowing that when she woke, the war would still be waiting. But so would she. 3 days later, intelligence intercepted communications from the enemy command. Translated transcripts reached Hayes' desk with one line highlighted in yellow. Recommend immediate withdrawal from Sector Victor. Our assessment. Position defended by specialist-grade counter-sniper capability. Acceptable losses exceeded. Target no longer viable. Hayes read it twice, then filed it in Rachel's service record. Under special recognition, he wrote, on the night of December 24th, Lieutenant Donovan eliminated a coordinated sniper threat through solo nighttime operations in adverse conditions. Her actions directly prevented enemy breakthrough and saved at least 8 Allied personnel. Demonstrated exceptional tactical thinking, physical endurance, and combat effectiveness. Recommend advancement to Tier 1 operations consideration. He signed it, dated it, and sent it up the chain of command. Then he walked to the operations tent where Rachel was briefing the new watch team on proper thermal scope protocol. She looked tired but solid back in her element, sharing hard-won knowledge with men who actually listened now. Donovan, Hayes called. Got a minute? She excused herself and joined him outside. I submitted your evaluation, he said. Command's going to want to talk to you about advanced training, Tier 1 stuff. She nodded slowly. Okay. That's it? Just okay? What else should I say, sir? Hayes smiled. Most people would be excited. This is the career maker conversation. Rachel looked out at the mountains, at the snow-covered peaks where she'd spent Christmas Eve fighting for her life and the lives of her team. I didn't do it for the career, Commander. I did it because someone had to, and I could. I know, Hayes said. That's exactly why you're getting the recommendation. He walked away, leaving her standing in winter sunlight that felt warmer than it had any right to be. Rachel breathed deep, tasting clean mountain air, feeling solid ground beneath her feet. Alive, present, ready for whatever came next. Behind her, Blake emerged from the operations tent. He stopped when he saw her, then walked over. Hey, Donovan, he said, his voice awkward but sincere. I wanted to say I was wrong, about you, about a lot of things. She turned to face him. Water under the bridge, Sergeant. Yeah, well, he shifted his weight. The guys are putting together a training session on night operations. They were hoping you'd run it. Show us what you did out there. Some of what I did was luck, and some of it was skill we need to learn. Blake extended his hand. What do you say? Rachel shook it. I say let's make sure luck isn't the only thing keeping us alive next time. As Blake headed back inside, Rachel allowed herself a small smile. Change was slow in military culture, but it happened. One night, one mission, one impossible victory at a time. She'd proven what she already knew, that being underestimated was sometimes an advantage, that silence could speak louder than boasts, and that the deadliest hunter was the one no one saw coming. The mountains watched in silence, keeping their secrets, and in that silence, Rachel Donovan had found her voice.